Now, I'm a believer that everybody should be able to get a nice watch, or at least a good watch for the money. And when you're dealing with that really affordable end, it is a bit tough to find some good options. It's kind of a lot of just the same old watches over and over again. But I think it is very important when you're looking at these entry-level price tiers to discuss it, because for me, this was where I got started. It was kind of this gateway into this world, and I think it's important to touch on it from time to time. Now, it's been some time since I've looked at a price range like this, but today we're going to be looking at watches under $150 to get started with in 2021. Now, as mentioned, I have looked at lists like this in the past, but I wanted to kind of revisit this a bit. Also, just kind of keep in mind before we jump into this, all these models for just this video here are gonna be under $150, but that could very well change in the future. Also, just availability and where you can get these might just change as well. So just keep that in mind if you're watching this in the future. Things can sell out, things can change. Just keep that in mind. I still get comments on videos I've done in the past about, hey, these watches are way more expensive now. Just can't really foresee those things. So just, be realistic with me here. We're gonna be looking at watches here in 2021 that make some sense here. Now, some of these watches, by just the limitations that come with producing a good watch for under $150 are gonna be maybe some repeats or things that you may have heard of. So just kind of keep that in mind, but I'm also gonna try to throw in some things that might be a little bit different as well. And before we jump into this video, I do wanna mention a great blog. If you want to get 40 additional watches for under the price range of $500, some great options there. Definitely check out the link in the description to a blog that we have looking at 40 amazing watches under $500. I'll link to that down below. So our first watch on the list here today is a dive watch, probably the epitome of a beater at an affordable range, and that is the Casio Duro. So this is no, I would say, newcomer on the scene of talking about affordable watches, and for good reason, because this is a watch that provides a ton of value for the money. If you're looking for a dive watch under $100, this has to be on a short list. Now, for a long time, most of the Casio Duros that were mentioned were the black dial version, but more recently, we have seen some other dial variations, one being the blue, that really have kind of just popped out for me, and I think really adapts well to a design that already I think was very mass appealing. This with the blue I think is even more appealing and kind of gives into the aquatic undertones of this piece. In terms of generally where you're gonna see these range at and for price, $60, and for that price, I think this is just such a hard watch to beat. You're getting suitable water resistance at 200 meters, mineral crystal on this, but wearability, 44 millimeters case, but keep in mind, lug to lug is 48 millimeters, so that is gonna wear closer to that of a 41 millimeter case. So, and I've just found that this actually works even on my wrist if you do stretch it to kind of that full extent. So just kind of keep that in mind. It wears much smaller than what that case size might indicate, but I think the great thing about this, the build quality far exceeds the actual price. In addition to that, the looks I think are pretty appealing as well. So you have good looks, functionality, and a price range that is incredibly hard to beat. Casio Duro is absolutely within the pantheon of affordable dive watches. Now, next up, we have the Casio G-Shock, the 9052 family. Now, whenever speaking about the most wearable, I would say mass appealing case dimensions for a G-Shock, because there are just a myriad of different options out there, I think most people just naturally go to the DW5600, and that's personally my favorite. But as another option here with the 9052, this is another line that has, I would say, more relatively wearable dimensions in a world of G-Shocks that typically lean to the larger end of things. But with this, you're getting a 48 millimeter case, but it's going to wear really just true to that all the way across when you're talking about it from vertical perspective across the wrist, wearing true to that 48 as well. You're getting all the functions that come with the G-Shock. These things are essentially indestructible. You are getting mineral glass here, but that does hold up well. We have a pretty well-worn model here that we can actually show. I just kind of see how this one will just age with some wear and tear. Also getting suitable water resistance at 200 meters. This is that one watch that when you're talking about just being able to do everything, I think a lot of people just maybe don't want to look in the G-Shock's direction just because it's just so obvious at times, but you can't dispute it. It is truly one of the most versatile watches out there, and if you can pull one off, this is certainly one to add to the collection because you cannot argue the value. So next up, we have Vostok with the Vostok Amphibia, going to be looking specifically at one reference that I reviewed, and I was absolutely blown away by the reception of that video. I had some fun doing it. I think these watches at times are kind of a hot mess, but also they're really easy to love as well, just because they don't take themselves too seriously. There's cool history behind it. There's also some creativity in the manufacturing of their case backs. There's just a lot that's involved with the Vostok Amphibia. This one I'm gonna be looking at the 12512. I got so many questions about the reference of the piece that we showcased in that video. I think right now it's at like over 300,000 views, which I am just amazed by. But I had a lot of fun doing that. I remember I recalled in that video I talked about like, I have, these more expensive watches, and I found myself on the weekend just wearing this Amphibia, this $70 watch. And I remember just like looking at it, and I remember my, girlfriend Courtney's asking me like, why are you wearing that watch? And I couldn't really put it to words, but I think when I was able to kind of piece together that video and speak to why I was wearing it, it really came down to the fact that it brought things back to a more rudimentary form in collecting. Looking at that watch, kind of digesting what made it special or what made it different and why it's such a cult classic, that allowed me to look at, I think, watches and also that video in a context that sometimes I don't rarely do anymore, which is, why did I get into this in the first place? And this watch reminded me of that. So you're getting history, you're getting, suitable water resistance, technology that is, I would say, really at the ground floor in terms of what it's going for, but is creative in how the seal of that case back works. Definitely recommend checking out that video. But the Vostok Amphibia, getting the watch, everything involved with it is an adventure in itself. The modding that's also available to it. Don't expect the greatest watch ever with these things, but for a $70 watch and the ability to have fun with some history involved, really can't beat this watch. Now I know it can't get far in a video like this without mentioning Seiko 5. So I'm going to just mention quite a few different models, but one that the first is gonna come up that's probably more of an obvious one, and that is the Seiko SNK 800 series. Right here, we're gonna be looking at the 805. So this is the green dial, more military inspired variant. Now we've seen some more updated versions of field watches from Seiko as of late, but if you're talking about some of the OGs from the Seiko 5 collection, these are them. These were gateway watches for so many people out there. I've owned honestly countless just models from this family at this point. I have bought, sold, and gotten given away so many of these watches, and they're just great. I mean, if you can get these under $100, still to this day, I mean, there's really nothing bad to say about them. They're versatile. They are a little bit more, I would say, juvenile, and I say that in a loving way. It does just have a more, I would say, playful appearance compared to some other Seiko 5s out there. But still, I mean, the legibility, the hands on this, that leaf style hands, it just looks the part. I think they look great. You're getting a 7S26, which of course I think we all know is not maybe the most up-to-date spec when you're talking about a Seiko automatic caliber, but for under $100, really gonna be tough to beat. So just to be a little bit different and mention something that maybe normally isn't as conventional as a pick, and that is the SNX series. So first I wanna look at the SNX-F 05. So this is a watch that I just like the design of. Very clean handset. You're getting a day date. Also getting a nice bracelet and case silhouette, which is a little bit different than the traditional Seiko 5 setup. Also finding these around $100 at the time of recording this video. That might very well change in the future, but just like the approach, like this kind of grid. The dial also is a bit more interesting in thought invoking than many other Seiko 5 models out there. I think these are fun, great everyday pieces. If you are going for something a little bit more, I would say, everyday in terms of its design approach. Also, you have the other case variants from this kind of model family, has the same silhouette, the SNX S077 and 079. These both bring a lot of the same just attractive nature that come with that other model mentioned, being very straightforward, but also versatile as a byproduct of that. Now next up we have Citizen, and looking at field watches again, the Citizen Chandler. So unlike some of these other mechanical options, Citizen really relies on their EcoDrive to drive a lot of this kind of entry-level offering from the brand. Now in terms of the intrigue here, this really creates a lot of just set it and forget it type of mentality when it comes to wearing these watches. If you are not somebody that is liking the idea of setting your watch every day or every other day, depending on the power reserve, but typically pretty much every day because I'm not dealing with great power reserves here if you're talking about mechanical watches, Citizen EcoDrive might be the type of watch for you. These watches utilize quartz oscillation, so you're getting that type of accuracy, but instead of using a battery, uses an actual solar cell and being able to actually charge through the use of actual artificial light or natural sunlight. Now, this is going to allow a great just set it and forget it type of experience. It's gonna give you a lot of just peace of mind when it goes out and about in terms of wearing this on a day-to-day basis. But I think the great thing about these is you get a lot of functionality in terms of the specifications, 100 meters of water resistance, nice wearability as well, and versatility when it comes to different straps to pair with this one. I just think this is a watch that I've always looked at within Citizen's entry-level perspective as just a kind of great starter watch and being able to kind of do a little bit of everything. Now next up we have the Orient Mako 2, and when we're talking about just value for money dive watches, Orient is easily one of the brands that is maybe the leader, honestly, at this point. Probably could say that. I mean, they offer such good value, and the Orient Mako 2 and the Raid 2 now are probably right there as some of the best options. I mean, you can get an in-house movement, Japanese movement on the inside, 200 meters of water resistance, nice looks on the dial, good bezel action, bracelet not so great, but nice wearing dimensions, all for around $150, give or take. These are amazing watches for the money. No question, you can have some fun with them. These aren't going to be like, say, ISO compliant dive watches. So, kind of keep that in mind. This isn't like the SKX and what it was years ago. But I find Orient's calibers really compete well with the competition when you're talking about movements. These, I think, perform incredibly well for an entry-level mechanical movement in terms of accuracy out of the box. Of course, that is going to depend on what model. It's not completely always guaranteed in terms of regulation. These are great watches from top to bottom. Can't really argue the value here. Also, as an honorable mention, I just want to say the Orient Bambino is a decent choice as well. I mean, maybe not decent. I've just mentioned it so many times. I think people know about this. You have so many different versions to go for. I wanted to give most of the shine to the Orient Mako just because that, from a dive watch perspective, it's a little bit harder to get good specs in that range. I think it's a bit easier to develop something like a dress watch in the price range like this compared to a dive watch. But do want to mention it as kind of an honorable mention, and just a quick mention that yes, the Orient Bambino can be found in this price range and is a good choice if you are looking for something of that type. Now jumping into a Swiss watch for $150. Now that is going to be very hard to come by, especially if you're talking about it from a mechanical perspective, but there is one, and that is the System 51. Now this isn't gonna be all System 51 watches. There are select references that you can get at $150 or less, and this particular one that we're gonna be looking at here is going to be one of them. In terms of a particular reference, we're looking at SO30B 400. Now the System 51 is the epitome, I would say, of fun from an entry-level position in Swiss watchmaking. These are eccentric. They are just a ton of individuality expressed within these dials. They are sometimes a little bit overboard depending on what your feel and style is, but there's no question they have a market and also are completely unique in the history of Swatch in allowing so much resurgence when you're talking about the Swiss watch industry. These do have some significance. And when you're dealing with the System 51s, you're talking about mechanical movements that, yes, are generally throwaway movements. So, this isn't something you're gonna service, but still, talking about a mechanical movement made in Switzerland, $150, very tough to beat, and not gonna be for everybody. I will say that from the design perspective, but you do have quite a few, and actually not quite a few, a abundant amount of options at your disposal when you're talking about the System 51s and what is really being delivered from this brand. Next here we have the Timex Weekender. Now when you look at some of those entry-level Timex watches, those department store watches like the Easy Reader and things like that, there's things like the date window on those that just, honestly, they're not very attractive. And they do kind of show the price of the watches, just given the finishing on those things. But a watch within the Timex collection at this really affordable range, say like under 50 bucks, that don't really look that, is going to be the Timex Weekender. In terms of my connection to this watch, this was a watch that was one of the first watches that I ever owned. I really enjoyed it. I wore it quite a bit. I gifted it to somebody down the line, but it was just a part of me getting into watches, and it was an important kind of stepping stone for me as I was just kind of getting into it. It clearly is one of the safest designs out there. The strap options that you can pair with this thing is endless. I have paired everything from just simple straps on it, NATO straps, all the way to something like an upscale type of reptilian strap that is like 3 times the price of the watch. Now that allows you to have a lot of fun with these, and I think does show what is capable of a watch like this. You talk about the Indiglo that comes with it. The thing ticks like no other in terms of how loud it is, but it all develops though an endearing package. And when you're talking about $50, give or take, it's just so hard to beat these things, and they're just fun watches at price ranges that are even more fun. And then last up on our list, we have the Braun with the BN0032. Now, I think when many people consider Braun in my neck of the woods, most are thinking about maybe the razors or their other elements of industrial design, but Braun has true history in developing different industrial clocks and all different types of industrial design. They are leaders when you're talking about this from industrial design perspective. And a lot of that also could be transferred over to their development of clocks and then also their watches. Now, if you're trying to get into this world of minimalist, Bauhaus-inspired design, which Braun does have a connection to with many of their just industrial design, this is going to be one that's on a short list, especially if you're talking about sub, $150 or so. They do have a variety of different options out there. In terms of a finishing perspective, these do leave quite a bit to be desired, but I think the design element of these, for a person that has a liking to this style, they're really going to gravitate towards these types of watches, I would say. And even myself, I look at these and I'm like, hey, these are pretty sharp. They look pretty cool. I mean, they definitely look their price, but they're fun. They're different. They have a pop of eccentric tone to them, which I think is really important when you're dealing with affordable watches and being able to kind of set a little bit of your own individuality here. Braun is a brand where, hey, is it truly a watch brand? No. Do they just make watches? Probably more a reasonable way of looking at this. But in terms of, do they make a nice looking watch, and is it at a really attainable end? And could I see some people that like this overall just inspiration and field of design in this type of package being drawn to these? Absolutely, and that's why I thought it made sense to put them on this list. But all right, guys, those are a list of watches under $150 in 2021 to take a look at. So if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Really would appreciate that. Also, please leave comments down below. What are some other watches that people could check out in this price range that you would recommend and you've worn for an extended period of time? Love to see those as well, and I know other people would too in their research. Also, if you want more watches at a little bit higher price range, also covering some of the watches in this price range, check out 40 more on the website with the blog, looking at 40 different watches under $500, some of the best ones in that price range. Link to it down below. Also, TeddyBaldessar.com, full authorized dealer of over 30 brands, including some brands that are even mentioned on this list, like Citizen, Orient, so definitely go check those out. So guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.